We're standing in front of Mount Scott, the eastern end of the Wichita Mountains, and want to talk about indigenous Kiowa beliefs.
Kiowas, like other Plains Indians, had this belief in power, which is pretty much a mysterious, transcendent life force that permeates the universe. It's found in everything. And as this life force, it causes all movement, including thought, and is also considered to be the source of stable physical forms. Now, the way people recognize power was that it's manifested by a multitude of beings in the visible and the invisible worlds, and it can be manifested through natural or even supernatural phenomena. So, for instance, power can exist in trees, mountains, stars, the sun, the moon, four-legged, winged creatures, plants, whirlwinds, lightning, thunder. All of them can manifest this idea of power. And among the different North American tribes, Kiowas referred to it as Dawdaw, which translates to mean magic or power. So they believed that this power force existed in everything. And like most Native Americans, considering the three levels of the universe, we can call them upper world, middle world, and lower world. Upper world would be represented by sun. Middle world would be the earth we're standing on, and then the air, the wind. And then the lower world would be like underground and the creatures that dwell below the ground and water and lakes and caves. And so the idea here is that power could be obtained by certain individuals. It's something that's out there. I think the best analogy is for Star Wars, the Force. It's just something that's out there. So for those of you who have watched Star Wars, have you ever thought, what exactly are they talking about? Well, it's this power force that's everywhere. Sometimes we use the term animatism to refer to that force. And it's neither good nor bad. It has manifestations of whatever it will be. So you hear in Star Wars, they talk about the dark side of the force. So the idea that the power can be used for good or bad. Now, individuals could receive this power by going on a vision quest, or by perhaps going through some life experience, such as being caught in a thunderstorm, or being injured, having an out-of-body experience. But for those individuals who had this encounter, they had the opportunity to obtain power, or Dawdaw, as Kiowas called it. Now, for those who are going on a vision quest, mostly it would be younger men who would go up into the mountains. And the idea is there's a hierarchy of power. So the power in upper world, represented by sun, is the most powerful. So obviously one would want to go as high in elevation as possible. And it's probably no irony that Kiowas always lived near mountains. So if a young man wanted to go on a vision quest to obtain power, he would probably consult with an older man who had power, receive a little bit of tutorial, and maybe he would serve as an apprentice to this older man. And so he would go to a mountain or an elevated area, and would probably go through a sweat lodge, purification beforehand, and then would be given instructions, and then would climb up to the highest possible point, wearing just a breechcloth, a wraparound, and then having a buffalo robe around his shoulders, usually with the hair side out. Sometimes they'd even paint their faces with white clay to represent the power of the white buffalo. You take a pipe, they usually take a long stem pipe that had a black bowl to it. And of course, the accoutrements, the pipe kit and tobacco, and would go into this elevated area and would fast and thirst and pray for up to 4 nights. Now, the idea of the tobacco is that it's an offering to the spirit world. It's considered to be pleasing. So the smoke actually carries the prayers to the spirit world. So there's always this misunderstanding about peace pipes and, why did Native Americans smoke pipes? Well, it's a sacred activity that is in conjunction with praying. And of course, the idea of being pitiful, being humble. Now, you could be up there for 4 nights and then nothing would happen. And most of the time, nothing happened. So then he'd go back down and just, okay, life goes on. And there's a belief among the Kiowas that if you lied about it, it would come back at you. So if you didn't get a power vision, then okay, that's it. Now, if you did get one, you would be given instructions through a dream spirit about items to pick up and put into a medicine bundle that could be birds, could be feathers, could be different rocks or crystals or bones or what have you, and would put those into a pouch, a buffalo hide pouch, and of course would learn a song that would go with that. And the idea is that the power this individual obtained would be manifest in that bundle, but then activated by the songs and prayers. So whatever purpose would be needed for whatever ritual would be held to use the power, that would be addressed. Now, the idea is that the spirit world, represented by plants and animals, oftentimes we refer to this idea of animism, which is the belief in the inner soul or other than human persons. So these spirit helpers, as I'll call them, could have access to power. So they had access to Dada and then could confer it to that individual who successfully obtained that vision. And so it could be a bird, it could be an eagle or a hawk, or some could actually get power from sun. Some actually got powers from snakes. So what would one do with power? And of course, this was usually a male domain, but sometimes women got power. And Kiowas admit that, okay, they were kind of sexist in a way, that power was a male domain, but because they practiced crevice burials in the mountains, that it's believed that if a woman were up there mourning near the grave of a husband, a son, a brother, and if that person, if a person who had been a medicine man was buried nearby, his spirit might take pity upon her and bestow her with power. So that would explain how some women obtain power. So let's say that a young man goes up and maybe he has to go up several times before he gets a power vision. So what can one do with power? Well, there were 2 types of power that the Kiowas recognized. One was healing power. Sometimes individuals went up into the mountains to fast and pray to recover from sickness, or perhaps a family member were sick. And so to go up and pray for that individual. Well, if an individual was given the opportunity to take healing power, then he would become a healer, or a shamans, as some call them, or medicine people, or Kiowas would just refer to them as doctors. So these individuals would be given certain powers to cure certain ailments. So maybe one obtained power to heal stomach disorders, or maybe headaches, or maybe one could tend to individuals who were having difficulty during childbirth and labor. So there are different types of powers. And of course, one could accumulate powers. One could have a multitude of power sources. Probably one of the more famous doctors was Tonacott, snapping turtle. And in his power vision, he was taken underwater and encountered these satanic beings, a water turtle, and was given powers to heal. And of course, he was very famous in that on several occasions, he took people who were sick and dove into bodies of water with the patient to heal them, taking them underwater and bringing them up again. So those were the healing powers. And of course, there is a special class of doctors, the Buffalo doctors. The last one I'm aware of passed away probably in the 19-teens. And these guys were like American Express, don't leave home without them. So they would go on war parties. And if one were injured with a bullet wound or an arrow wound, they would be called upon, and they knew how to staunch the flow of blood and could treat those who were injured. So they were very prominent, and they actually had a society that anthropologists have referred to as the Buffalo Medicine Lodge. And they would periodically get together to renew their bundles. So they were pretty well known. Now, the other type of power is war power. This is the individual who would have prowess in warfare. Typically, one would emblazon a buffalo hide war shield with symbols of power that he obtained. So maybe would have like a hummingbird attached to the shield to represent being able to dodge bullets and arrows. Or same thing with hail or rain, the ability to not be hurt by bullets or arrows, or having crescent moons or suns or different designs on those shields. And of course, they carry them into battle. And buffalo shields or war shields would always be kept outside of the teepee on a scaffold, kind of like an artist tripod, or I guess that would be like a tripod or an easel, and would face the rising sun in the morning. And of course, the wives of these keepers, so they also had their own medicine bundles. Their wives were typically instructed in how to care for them as well. And if something happened to the husband, then, the power would have to be passed on to somebody, or else it would be gone. There's this belief that when a person died, the power shot out of his mouth up into the atmosphere. So one would actually have to catch that power in his or her own mouth. And by the 1930s, when anthropologists were interviewing Kiowas, they found that some people were reticent to do this because they knew that having the power created so many restrictions in one's lifestyle, having to follow certain taboos, not eating certain foods, or certain behaviors not allowed around an individual. So it was pretty strict. Now, all of this began to fade away by the turn of the last century, and probably the biggest factor was 1875 when Kiowas and Comanches and Plains Apaches were forced to live on the reservation. They had this 2.8 million acre reservation in southwestern Oklahoma. Warfare ended, buffalo hunting, buffalo would become extinct in the southern plains by 1879. And a lot of the rituals like the sun dance that were connected to hunting buffalo and war power and sun power would all fade away. But in the 1870s, new religions came in, a number of Christian missionaries, of Catholics, Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists started coming to the reservation, and in the 1880s and 90s began to slowly convert people. Likewise, the peyote religion came to the Kiowas and Comanches probably by the 1870s. The Indian agent was first aware of it in 1885. And so by the turn of the 20th century, the Christianity and peyote, which would become the Native American Church in 1918, would become the dominant religions. Did people still believe in Dada and power and that sort of thing? Sure. The only difference is that it was incorporated into the new religions. So the idea that these amalgams of beliefs would continue. So for Christianity, the idea is that instead of being available to certain people, Dada was available to everybody. And Isabel Crawford, who was the missionary at Saddle Mountain, and she's the one who started the mission church there. Somehow it seems that she convinced people that Jesus was like a guardian spirit, and that he would take care of the sick and that the dead would live with him. And so that became, especially in the Saddle Mountain area, would become a predominant theme, even though the ghost dance happened, between the 1890s and 19 teens. Some ideas of Dada and power were incorporated into the ghost dance as well, but of course it would fade away and would only be manifest in songs that people remember and some more recorded. Power also associated with peyote because, like Christianity, the healing powers of peyote were major attractants to people. And whenever a peyote or a teepee meeting was held, the idea is that in the morning right before sunrise would be a curing ritual where someone who was sick would be brought in and taken care of. And incidentally, in Henrietta Tonkamay's autobiography, she actually writes about, or she wrote about, being taken into a peyote meeting around 1918 when she was 6 years old because she was sick. So does power exist today? Well, one thing I learned that at the Kiowa Gourd Clan, they when they have their ceremonies every 4th of July weekend, or whenever it happens, that they put power into the songs that are for the soldiers who are going overseas. And it's not too uncommon for soldiers to have their own personal medicines that they take with them. Gus Palmer Jr., who was, Gus Palmer Sr., who was a World War II veteran, you might see his Horace Pula photograph where he's in the war bonnet, and he was a waist gunner. He actually had a little peyote button in a pouch that his mother-in-law made that he wore with his dog tags. And so his whole crew, they asked him, "Can your mother-in-law make us a medicine that'll protect us too?" And he said, "No, this one will protect all of us." So in all the missions he flew over Germany during the end of the war, they came back unscathed. So the idea of power is still manifest in different ways. You don't hear people talk about it much today, unless you hear it from an elder who might be inclined to talk about it. It's just not really discussed all that much. In Marriott's book, she calls them the 10 medicines. These were actually the bundles. These were like the sacrosanct medicine bundles of the Kiowas, which originated from the split boys, who I guess you say in ancestral times, they were the individuals who went around and slew different monsters and kind of put things in order. One of the boys turned himself into the 10 medicines. So technically they're not called the 10 grandmothers. Somehow I think Marriott's collaborator was thinking about reciprocal kin terms between a grandmother and a grandson, where Tali means little boy.
Okay.
She could call him little boy Tali, and he could address her the same way. Just like Raymond and I address each other as Segi, that's a reciprocal kin term that he's my uncle. So the real name for the bundles is the Zaide Tali, the split boy bundles, or sometimes they're called the Tali Da'i, the boy bundles. And of course, those were the bundles that people would take prayers to, and they're still around today. But one of the things Kiowas had to do by the 1930s or thereabout was to renew the bundles. They had to take things out that no longer belonged there, like enemy scalps sometimes were put in the bundles. So as far as I know, they renewed them the best as they could. But again, the fate of them, I mean, it's just something that one does not ask about. I found in my own field work, back in '80s when I was, starting, people would say, "Oh yeah, we have one of those in my family," and that would be it.